Institutions don't just collapse when the doors finally close. They collapse when feedback stops changing behavior. The building itself can still be standing. The meetings can still happen. The reports, they're still being written. But inside, the institution may have already lost the one thing that actually keeps it alive: correction. In this explainer, we're diving straight into the anatomy of systemic failure, forensically examining how the very structures designed to maintain order slowly, quietly turn into the engines of their own demise.
Picture a polished, official institution. Symmetrical, stable. The doors are open, the lights are on, and documents are moving smoothly through the corridors. At first glance, everything looks perfectly functional, right? But if you look closer, there are these invisible amber stress lines beginning to form deep inside the walls. A warning signal fades out before it ever reaches the center. A decision path gets tangled up. The building is whole on the outside, but internally, the system is straining under its own weight.
You see, the true lifeblood of any system isn't its daily activity, it's its ability to course correct. We so often assume a massive failure happens the exact moment everything abruptly grinds to a halt. But frankly, that's a profound misunderstanding of how systems actually work. The machinery can keep humming along for years, completely divorced from reality. Because an institution does not fail when it stops operating. It fails when operation no longer produces correction.
Section 1. The building still stands.
This brings us right to our anatomical diagnostic. We have to completely strip away the deceptive illusion of a fully functional exterior. Think about what a failing institution actually looks like from the outside. Thick, polished reports are continuously written, printed, and filed away. Executive dashboards are glowing a reassuring green. Public statements sound incredibly confident. But here's the thing. Motion and busyness are absolutely not the same thing as learning. The institution can remain busy long after it has stopped correcting itself. The system is moving, sure, but it's no longer adapting to the real world outside its walls.
Section 2. Public failure is late.
Now, what's really interesting about these invisible markers is that long before the explosive public scandal, the sudden bankruptcy, or the dramatic public inquiry, the organization was already actively negotiating with failure in private. What's truly terrifying is just how quiet these early markers are. An ignored warning, an aerospace safety report that gets slightly softened before going to the board, a frontline signal about poor service that just gets blocked by middle management, a problem that gets reclassified instead of actually being solved. These are the stress fractures, each one slowly compounding over time, quietly eating away at the institution's coherence, while the surface remains completely calm.
Section 3. Bureaucracy as friction.
We're moving deeper into the institution's anatomy now to examine how the very arteries of decision-making begin to clog. Look, bureaucracy is not automatically a bad thing. A healthy institution desperately needs it for institutional memory, procedure, accountability, and evidence-based checks. But bureaucracy becomes incredibly dangerous when it stops protecting the correction process and starts protecting itself. The route slows down. Layers of paperwork, endless committees, and defensive approval gates just start accumulating. And why does this matter? Because every added layer of defensive procedures simply stores more stress in the system. When an institution becomes obsessed with defending its own processes rather than solving the actual problem, truth travels very slowly. The bureaucracy becomes a heavy debt, sapping the exact coordination energy the institution needs to survive. Bureaucracy becomes collapse debt when it costs more coordination than the institution can recover.
Section 4. The feedback loop breaks.
Okay, let's dive into this and shift our focus to the institution's nervous system to forensically examine how vital information flows and ultimately how it fails. This loop is the absolute core of institutional life. Signal enters, decision responds, action changes, results are measured, correction returns. At first, the loop closes smoothly, but in a decaying institution, breaks begin to appear. The signal just doesn't reach the decision maker, or the decision doesn't actually change the action on the ground. The pathway for correction gets entirely blocked.
An institution doesn't need to be inherently evil to fail. It simply needs to lose the ability to update based on real-world results. When this feedback loop is healthy, mistakes are caught and they become learning. But when that loop is severed, when the decay really sets in, mistakes become culture. A structural flaw in a product isn't fixed. The engineers just learn to stop reporting it. Unresolved failures simply become the new normal way of doing business.
This is the starkest reality of systems collapse. When the warning arrives, but the behavior remains exactly identical, failure isn't just an accident anymore. It's been absorbed into the very policy of the institution. When feedback stops changing behavior, failure becomes policy.
Section 5. Trust as coherence.
Let's examine the connective tissue of the organization to understand what happens when the people inside literally stop telling each other the truth. Trust is not just an emotion. It is a structural necessity. It's the coordination medium that prevents decision networks from tangling. When trust within an organization is high, information moves lightning fast, and course correcting is incredibly cheap.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when that connective tissue rots. Every single message requires a defense. Every decision requires administrative cover. Every minor error becomes intensely political, and every necessary correction feels like personal blame. The system literally overheats because the friction of simply telling the truth becomes way too high a price to pay.
Section 6. The geometry of collapse.
Let's bring all these structural elements together and apply our forensic diagnostic framework to real-world institutional failure. Metrics are incredibly useful when they act as a window into reality. But failing institutions will relentlessly protect a green dashboard metric while completely ignoring the rotting foundation. They manage the metric, not the reality. It's like a hospital optimizing for low waiting room times by just leaving patients untreated out in the ambulances.
Applying this diagnostic framework reveals the hidden vital signs of collapse. Internally, the system stores massive stress through worker burnout, deep mistrust, and paralyzing backlogs. Operationally, it delays recovery by continually pushing off vital maintenance, repair, and basic honesty. And ultimately, it exports its costs, pushing the heavy price of its own failures onto public trust, onto its workers, and onto future budgets. The system looks officially calm, but behind the scenes, it's carrying massive, invisible debt.
Institutional collapse is prepaid. Every ignored warning, every softened report, every delayed repair. These were all installments paid toward the final collapse. It only feels sudden because the final breaking point is the only part the public actually gets to see. But the preparation was agonizingly slow. Each small failure looked entirely survivable, right up until the hidden cracks finally connected.
The ultimate takeaway from this explainer is this. A healthy institution isn't flawless. It isn't one that never makes mistakes or perfectly avoids disturbance. A resilient, surviving institution is one that can hear bad news early. It protects its truth tellers. It repairs without denial. And it actually changes its route before total collapse becomes the only remaining feedback mechanism.
Institutions do not collapse because one person makes one bad decision. They collapse when the geometry of the system loses the ability to turn reality into correction. So, the next time you see a spectacular institutional failure on the news, I want you to look past the dramatic breaking point and ask yourself this. Did it really fail today when the doors closed, or did it fail years ago, the exact moment it stopped telling itself the truth?